In this video, I'll be showcasing 10 brand new Eradicator exotic ideas I came up with. If you guys happen to enjoy this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing and using code WATSOG in the Fortnite item shop. And yeah, let's get straight into the video. Alright, so first we have the Eradicator Blaster Assault Rifle. This is an exotic version of the Hammer Assault Rifle, and when damage is dealt with the Eradicator Blaster Assault Rifle, it will charge up. The last shot in the clip of this weapon will create an explosion, with damage being based on how much damage you dealt with the rest of the clip. So to kind of put this in a kind of like TLDR, kind of short form, basically as you shoot this weapon, it will charge up a little bit, and on the last shot, an explosion will be created. And that explosion is based on how much damage you dealt with the rest of the clip. So you have 20 shots basically to charge up your damage, and that last shot, you just get a big explosion. A bunch of, like, if you hit every shot, you'd basically just kill them, right? Although, if you hit every shot, you probably wouldn't need the last explosion. Kind of think about it like, you hit a few shots, but you didn't kill them, but this last shot, would have a little bit of an explosion, and that would finish them off, right? That's kind of how I think this weapon would work. It could also be nice for, like, destroying builds a bit. Now, you shoot that last shot, you break the wall, and then you create the explosion, and then they're dead, right? Kind of a fun little idea. You could also, just do a bunch of damage, and then have the last shot just ready, and then once you run into someone, bam, hit that shot, they're dead, Work like that, I think. And I think this weapon would actually be pretty solid. Obviously, it being a hammer assault rifle would already mean it was pretty good, but I just think that the explosion effect just adds a nice little buff to this weapon, Not that it really needs one, but I think it's nice. Next, we have the Eradicator Swiftness SMG. This is an exotic version of the Stinger SMG, and after shooting the Eradicator Swiftness SMG, you will gain the sliding movement buff from the Surge Medallion for a short period of time. If you don't remember the Surge Medallion, it was the one that you got at the Hive, that gave you the really slippery slide kind of effect. Really good for movement, and I just think this would be a good way to reintroduce that effect, right? In my opinion, if they wanted to balance the medallions more, they should have just made an item or something like that gave you the effect of the medallion for a short period of time, and have just the medallion give you it while you have the medallion in your inventory, so that everyone could experience the effect, but the medallion would still be good, right? And you'd still want to go after it. They obviously didn't do that, and they just removed it like a month into the season, which in my opinion was really stupid, but what can you do? I think this weapon would be pretty good, and I think it'd be really good, W key kind of weapon. You could really easily push your opponents, because you shoot this weapon, then you just slide right towards them, and then you can finish them off, right? I think this would be a very solid SMG. Next, we have the Eradicator Breach and Sneak Shotgun. This is an exotic version of the Sweeper Shotgun, and the Eradicator Breach and Sneak Shotgun has drastically increased structure damage. Every time you break a structure with the Eradicator Breach and Sneak Shotgun, all nearby enemies will be marked. So, you shoot this at a wall, you break the wall instantly, because the whole thing is that it's a breacher shotgun, right? So you shoot the wall, break it immediately. And now that you broke that wall, every opponent in the nearby radius will be marked, and you know where every single one of them is. So let's say there's a bunch of people, you would know where everyone is, you would know if they are coming to third party, your fight. It would just make you a lot more aware, and it would still help you in the fight that you're currently in too, right? So I think this would be a very solid shotgun. The only thing holding it back, in my opinion, is that it's a sweeper shotgun, and that weapon is not known for being a very good shotgun, right? So it's kind of like a pick your poison kind of situation, right? Although you could always just pair this with the Wrecker revolver. I think it'd be a pretty solid exotic, but I don't think people would be using it for their shotgun, in my opinion. Kind of like how they do with the Breacher Shotgun already. Next, we have the Eradicator Power Burst Pistol. This is an exotic version of the Hyper Burst Pistol, and each shot in a single burst from the Eradicator Power Burst Pistol does a drastic increase of damage from the previous shot, and then this damage is of course reset on each burst fired. So I believe the burst pistol shoots in bursts of 3, so think about it like this. The first shot in that burst would do the normal amount of damage that the Hyper Burst does, right? The second shot, let's say, would do an additional 10 damage, and then that third shot would do an additional 10 damage on top of that, right? So now, instead of doing I think in Legendary it does 19, so instead of doing 54 in one burst, right, you're doing closer to 84, right? Which is a crazy buff for this weapon. Probably be very good for getting into someone's structure, and if you hit all 3 shots in a burst, they are at a significant disadvantage, right? I think this weapon would be very solid. Obviously, the Hyper Burst is already a pretty solid pistol as it is, so just adding more damage into the mix would obviously make it way better, right? Would be a solid exotic, definitely better than the other exotic Hyper Burst, the Voltage pistol would be way better than that, in my opinion, I think it would be very good. Next, we have the Eradicator Thermal Heat DMR. This is an exotic version of the Deadeye DMR, and the Eradicator Thermal Heat DMR has a thermal scope. Probably could have picked that up by reading the name, right? Each each shot from this weapon also has a chance to set structures it hits on fire. So it's not guaranteed that if you hit something, it'll set it on fire. You only have a chance to do it, but that chance, you know, is definitely a very nice addition to have. Having a thermal scope isn't really enough to make this weapon good, but I think the fire definitely has a chance to make this weapon definitely have a use. I don't think this weapon would be like very favored, right? Because the DAI DMR is just not a very good weapon in the first place, but I think adding this to make it more like a structured damage kind of based weapon, I think would be a very nice addition. Also, the thermal scope would definitely make it easier to see your opponents, you know, so could help with that too. Overall, do I think this exotic would be very good? Probably not, but I do think it would see some like niche use, right? I think it would have its fans, right? Next, we have the Eradicator Seeker Storm Strike. This is obviously an exotic version of the Swarm Strike, and when you shoot the Eradicator Seeker Swarm Strike, the rockets will automatically follow your opponent in exchange for reduced damage. The reload speed on this weapon is also significantly faster. The normal Storm Strike, you know, you can't have them seek, right? So like, you shoot it normally, they just kind of go where you shoot them, and then if you ADS, it'll have like the laser and it'll follow your laser where you follow it. This weapon would just like seek onto your opponent, it would lock onto them, and it would go towards your opponent instead, right? And now in exchange for this, instead of doing like 200 damage, right? Because like that's what the Swarm Strike already does, it can one-shot someone. Instead of doing that much damage, I'd say probably keep it down more like to 100, you know? And, you know, the reload speed definitely helps with making this weapon not like fall behind its normal counterpart, right? I do think this would have competition with the normal Swarm Strike, though I don't think it's definitively better, right? Just due to the damage nerf. I think it would be a good weapon. I don't know if it would be better than the Swarm Strike, but I definitely think there's a discussion to have about, you know, the viability between the two weapons, you know? At the end of the day, this is a seeking rocket launcher. It's gonna be good. It's just, would it be better than the other one? Right? I think it would be good. I just don't know if it would be the meta. Next, we have the Eradicator Storm Spitter 3000. This is an exotic version of the Lead Spitter 3000, and when you hit an opponent with the Eradicator Storm Spitter 3000, they will begin taking damage as if they were in the current storm. The duration of the storm damage shrinks the higher the current storm damage is. So, you know, think about this. You hit them with this weapon, first storm circle, right? You do 1 extra damage per tick, and like it ticks for like about 3 seconds, right? But then once you get to the final circle, you're doing like an extra 10 damage, right? But that tick damage only lasts for like 1 tick, right? So you're still doing more damage overall, but you're not getting like 30 damage. Otherwise, that would be like incredibly busted, right? That would be insane. And this weapon would probably already be very good, right? Because you're doing extra damage with the Lead Spitter, right? So I think it would be a very solid weapon already, but I don't think that it would be as OP, right? Because like the legendary version of the Lead Spitter only does like 5 damage, I think. So, you know, think about it like this. First storm circle, you're only getting like 8 damage on it. But in the last storm circle, if you decide to carry it that long, you're going to be doing like somewhere up to like 15, right? 15 per shot is nothing to scoff at, right? That is very good, especially with a weapon like this. It's definitely a weapon that's like, you kind of need to be patient with it, but, you know, if you're patient with it, you know, it'll pay off. It'll pay off, right? I think it would be a good weapon. It would probably be very good for late game. Like, I think a lot of people would carry this weapon if they had the chance. Next, we have the Eradicator Shockwave Shotgun. This is an exotic version of the Havoc Pump Shotgun, and when you hit an opponent with the Eradicator Shockwave Shotgun, you will be launched up into the air as if you had just used a shockwave grenade. So, I feel like this would be a very niche weapon, and the inspiration for this weapon was actually the wind charges from Minecraft, right? Where like you use those, you launch it up. I think a better comparison actually would be to the wind burst enchantment for the mace, where you hit someone with it and then you launch yourself up in the air. Now, obviously that works better for the mace because the mace does more damage the longer you fall, right? But for Fortnite, the shotgun, I think, you know, you hit someone with it. I think this one would be very niche, but I think it could like see some utility. Not really utility, I guess, because like, I don't know, trick shotting is not really a utility, but I think it'd be used for some really cool trick shots. I know that's not really like a big thing nowadays, but you know, it could be cool. Could be very cool. Then again, maybe you could also use this just to get high ground. You know, you hit them, start building up immediately. Could be good. Get immediate high ground. Then again, I think having this as your sole shotgun would definitely be risky. So I feel like people would have to pair it with a Wrecker Revolver, right? It would be situational, in my opinion. Very situational. Next, we have the Eradicator Final Mark Assault Rifle. This is an exotic version of the Assault Rifle, obviously. And when you hit an opponent with the Eradicator Final Mark Assault Rifle, your opponent will be marked. When you hit a marked opponent with this weapon, they will take increased damage. So this is very similar to the the Lawless Final Mark Rifle that one sniper from Chapter 6 Season 2, where you hit them, it would mark them, and now that they're marked, they would take extra damage. This is basically the same effect. So think about it like this. You hit your opponent first, you're doing normal scar damage, right? But now that they're marked, your damage will be increased, be closer to like 40 damage per shot, which is an incredible amount of damage to be doing, right? So like you go from like 35, I'd probably say keep this on the lower side for like assault rifle damage, so maybe even do like 33, right? But now that you're hitting a marked opponent, 40 damage, increase it, make it insane, right? So I think this weapon would be very solid, although, you know, the normal assault rifle is kind of outdated, you know, especially in a meta right now where we have like the Hollow Twister and the MK7, right? I think this weapon wouldn't be as good as those weapons, but I definitely think you could see some use out of it. I think it would be a very good pressure kind of base weapon. Kind of like how the Eradicator OXR is, where like you hit them more and they do more damage. This is kind of like a similar gimmick, you know? You hit them and then you deal more damage instead of being like every consecutive shot deals more damage, right? This is kind of similar to that, but I don't know if it would be as good because I feel like the OXR is kind of a bit better than the Scar, but I still think this weapon would be very good. I think it would be very solid. Now, finally, you know, it's kind of a tradition at this point. If we do an exotic series, we gotta do a suppressed pistol, and we have a suppressed pistol here. We have the Eradicator EMP pistol, obviously an exotic version of the suppressed pistol, and the first and last shot in the clip of the Eradicator EMP pistol will create a mini shield breaker EMP explosion. Very simple effect, you know, very similar to the voltage burst pistol, but instead of a shockwave, it's an EMP. It wouldn't do as much damage as an EMP grenade, like I'd say only like maybe 20 damage. You know, instead of like 70. But, you know, you obviously have the EMP effect, you know, kind of like stock cars. Definitely think it would be very nice, especially in metas when we have very heavy car kind of focus, right? Whereas like the main kind of mobility item, in Zero Build especially. I won't say item, it's like a vehicle, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's a very important mobility kind of item, vehicle. I don't know why I keep saying item, it's a vehicle. And it's also very important for Zero Build because you get like a bunch of shield, like, or a bunch of like shelter, right? So, just being able to disable that, I definitely think would be good. I think this would be a very solid exotic. I don't think it would be anything too crazy, but it would be good, nonetheless. Alright, if you guys enjoyed that video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, and using code WATSOG in the Fortnite item shop. And yeah, see you in the next one. Later.